recording.
It has
Started
started
again, yeah.
now. Yeah.
Started.
Yeah, I think people are coming in.
Acha, I'm also. Should I be admitting people in?
No, you don't need to. No,
Oh.
I will do that. Hi, Sagar. Thanks for joining, Asta. Thank you. We just are going to wait for others to join in and we'll start. So you could go on mute or just wait for another 5 or 10 minutes, please.
Vanshika, I was actually going to call you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just needed
Yes.
clarity on something.
Yes, we should connect anyway.
Yeah,
Yes,
anyway, yeah.
absolutely. Yes.
Hi, Supriya. Thanks for joining. Hey, Shivangi. Hi. Thanks for joining in. Just a few minutes more, folks. We're just waiting for a few more people to join in and then we'll start. Yeah. Hi, Sophia.
Hello. Hi, Anand.
Okay. Right, we should start in another minute. We should start in.
Sure.
I think people will join in later.
Okay, sure.
Just give them a minute more, max. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, for all those who just joined in, we're just waiting for a minute more and then we'll kick off. Just a minute more and we'll start. We're all good to go.
Okay, so today we are speaking about the power of content and brand IPs. And the person that whom we have in the house, who's actually going to speak. Let me tell you a little about her. She's been vice president with Sony Entertainment Television, done a role with Z5 in terms of content creation, but above all, she's been known as somebody who's knows production, programming, and content creation all together. That's what she's known for. She's also won award as a producer. And apart from that, there's another facet to her, which is she's a marine conservationist and also the president of the Alumni Association of Harvard Women in India. So let me welcome to the house Anupama Mandloi.
Hi, Zahid. Thanks for the introduction. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this today. And I will try and make this 1 hour meaningful, at least to whatever level possible. I'll give you a little background just to add to what Zahid said. I've been part of programming for 15 years. And then I was managing director at Fremantle Media, which is known for its international formats. And subsequently, I stepped off the corporate ladder and I'm working independently. I consult with C5 and I do a couple of other things. So that's about who I am and what I do. Today, I thought that we just talk about, I believe a lot of you are marketing professionals, and there is always this sort of tension between sales, marketing, and content. But when the three work together, it's magic. Today, I thought I'll take the perspective of content purely and talk about how formats are brands in themselves and why are they so successful? And is it possible for us to make branded entertainment into formats? Is that a possibility? Is that even a necessity at all? So let me first start with the difference between a brand and a format. A format is the overall concept and branding of a copyrighted television show, and this is according to Wikipedia. Please note that it is a copyrighted piece of work. Now, we'll come back to that a little later, but in comparison, what is a brand? A brand is an intangible marketing or business concept that helps people identify a company, product, or individual. So it's a trademark. From the two definitions, it's easy to see that a brand and format are more or less interchangeable. So let's take this further. What are formats? Why are they successful? And what leverage do they carry over any regular show? And by regular show, I mean shows that don't have longevity. They are sort of short-term shows that come in for a period of time. They entertain, sometimes they don't, sometimes they fail to, but these are all regular shows that come and go, and there are millions of those. However, formats and super formats at that are possibly 10 to 15 across the world. So there must be a reason to that success, right? So I thought it would be an interesting way to look at them and look at branded entertainment accordingly. I would also request all of you that I don't want to make this a lecture. So if any of you at any point in time have something to ask or something to say, please feel free to say so. Yeah.
I request you to raise your hand.
Yeah. So after we discuss of that, we'll move into branded entertainment. So first, let's just discuss global IP. Now, there are international formats like Idol, Got Talent, Big Brother, MasterChef, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. All of these formats, I think most of us are by now familiar with. And these shows basically originated outside India, but their universality has allowed them to be easily replicated and adapted across different audiences and cultures, almost in 25 countries. So what do you think makes them universal? Does anyone want to take like a go at it?
Early in the session.
Okay. So basically, if we were to look at the elements that make a format successful, there is music, there is food, there are stories, there are dreams, emotion, aspiration, talent, hope, inspiration, glamour, scale, fame, money, vicariousness, competition. I'm sure there are many, many more, but these are some of the necessary elements, I would say, in any of these shows that make them relatable to almost every audience across the world. And these are factored in layers through components of the show, like judges, contestants, prize money, stages in the show. So it all seems pretty simple on the face of it, right? I mean, regular shows by that logic also have the same elements, but why don't they become formats? Or why aren't there more successful super formats or even formats? I think the reason is that, one, it requires a whole lot of investment, which people are not very eager to make. And I'll come to why that is the case. There is also, it's a mindset. So the readiness to play a long-term game, building the brand attributes, keeping consistency, refreshing and revitalizing the seasons, cross-pollination of elements that you draw from across the globe and different cultures. All of this goes into sort of maintaining a format over successive seasons, and it never stops. So also let me take you through a couple of, the kinds of revitalizations people do in a format. So sometimes you have Idol Junior, you have different airing strategies. So sometimes it's weekend versus weekday. I remember when I was in Sony, we tried out these different telecast strategies where the theater segment of Idol would play out on the weekdays. So from Monday to Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday would be the galas. And all, that kind of thing suddenly broke the predictability of the way you saw the show. And it created created more engagement. So that's one way of doing it. Then, of course, there are celebs and couple oriented, and there are themes, there are new songs, there's the regional element and regional adaptations. And then there is just adapting the structure in terms of, so for any format, there is a given blueprint, right? Within that blueprint, sometimes you change one or two things. But the beauty of a format is that expectation is always there with the viewer. So the viewer knows that this is what I'm going to get out of the show. Within that, all the components are up for revitalization and readaptation. So now, when we have these formats and these are created by companies, then obviously valuation also comes into the picture, right? So an individual like, let's say, Simon Fuller, who's behind Idol, or companies like Fremantle, Endemol, Banijay have high valuations because they own this IP, right? They have the ones who've put their skin in the game, they have invested, they have researched, they have tried out the format, and then they've put it on sold it to, or licensed it actually, more than sold it to a platform. So in India, unfortunately, it's a very different setup. As you all know, I'm sure, is that any show other than these international formats, so the IP is created by the producer very often, but it is brought out completely by the broadcaster. So the producer has no rights. What does that make the producer? It makes the producer a vendor, a service provider, not really somebody who's invested in creating the show, because they're paid. It's low risk. The risk then lies on the distribution side, and therefore.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, could you guys go on mute, please? Whoever's speaking, yeah. Go ahead, Anupam, please.
So that's where the sort of game changes, because the minute you own IP, you're more invested. And see, that's the difference also in terms of when you have, as a broadcaster, your role and your game and your aim is actually very, very different. It is to aggregate content and make it and provide it to your viewers. So it's to build a wider viewership. The role of a production company, if you were to own the IP, is completely invested in that product. And it is in your interest as a producer then to monetize that product in whatever way possible. And now I'll come to that. When we are talking about one more thing that
I think Nishant had a question related to what you were saying. Nishant,
yeah,
go ahead.
sure.
Yeah, so I don't come from this particular background, so that is the reason why I'm coming up with a very basic kind of question. First of all, I would like to understand when it comes to formats. Are there any kind of classification of formats? There are different kinds of formats, and because all the the kind of logos that I'm seeing here are all reality based. So is it necessary that it has to be all reality based, or what is it? So that is what I
Not
want
at
to
all.
understand.
Not at all. I think a format is a format. These are definite blueprints, but if you were to look in the fiction space, let's say, what is that? Ugly Betty. That has been adapted in multiple countries, including the USA. It originated from South America. It's been adapted into Jassi Jaisi Koi Nahi in India. So in a sense, that's a format too. But non-fiction shows have the because the format is so simplified, it can be replicated into multiple seasons without depending on stretching out a storyline. So, even on Jassi Jaisi Koi Nahi in India, it had to be stretched beyond and outside of the story that was the original story in South America. Whereas these shows, but by their nature, they are shows that allow them. So whether it is game shows, whether it is reality content, whether it is vicarious content like Bollywood Wives or Big Brother, this is all the kind of content that can be replicated. So you use a sort of construct within which that construct can be replicated 500 million times. Within it, you can play around, and that's the reason why they work better as an example of formats. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and do we have any clear classification? That there are various types of formats, like this format, that format, this format.
Yeah, so I mean,
By
like I said,
definition, kind of thing.
by definition, I don't know, but by genre, yes. So whether it is a reality show or it's a game show or it's a sort of music talent hunt show, these would be the various genres within formats. But otherwise, in terms of, I don't think that there are definitions to format shows.
Sure, thanks.
Then we go into the creator and owner mindset. So you have the platform versus the producer or content creator. And hence, so as a creator, if I have, and if I own the IP, let's look at, again, an Idol or a Got Talent. When we had done that show with Colors, one of the seasons we decided to allow YouTube to use or allow people to post clips on YouTube. In fact, as the broadcaster, also we were putting out clips on YouTube. What allowed, and that is what is done internationally, what it allows is that the clips go viral and that audience comes on to the television show as well. So just one example, in that particular season, there was a child called Akshay Singh. I think he was 8 years old. He was a dancer. And his clip went viral on YouTube. And it was noticed by Ellen DeGeneres, her chat show. And her people contacted us. And they wanted Akshay Singh to appear on her chat show in the US. And that sort of created so many talking points for the format that it enabled it to grow that much more. So the whole point of owning IP is to be able to monetize the IP and to take it outside of just the limited purview of television. And that's what these companies do really well, because they are invested completely. Their whole game is to be able to take this outside and create as many extensions as possible. So I'd also like to just mention the applause model, where again, they look at various genres and various kinds of shows, not just fiction. And as they pick up all those formats, they are the ones who are creating that piece of content and taking it to the two different distributors. So whether they are licensing it, there is that complete ownership of the property. And this is what sort of I think is going to happen as we go forward into this new content era, is that people will want to own a share of the IP and be able to sort of monetize it and become less of just content providers and more of sort of people who own content and are also able to increase the valuation of their own companies. Because today, if you look at a production company, it's zero valuation. It is just at the most, if there are some production companies that own edit suites and equipment and have great talent, that would be like the maximum extent of the valuation, but they don't own the assets, right? The content as assets are part of the distribution platforms. So that's where, the game has to change a little bit. Now, again, as I was talking about taking it out on YouTube, looking at content just beyond content, there are creating collaterals or brand extensions, which could be in the purview of licensing, live events, merchandise, digital properties. So you have a master chef that has, collaterals like cookware, magazines. There is an Australia's Festival of Live Cooking that takes place. There are winners products that are sold in retail, which happened here as well with MasterChef. And then there are cookbooks. For Big Brother, there is a 24-hour live feed on digital outside of the television show. So as a viewer, and this is what they do internationally, they started doing it from this season in India, where it launched first on digital and then went into television. What it allows you to do is with that 24-hour stream, I become completely invested as a viewer, where I want to explore and I want to see what my favorite contestant is up to. I log into the digital portal and I check out and I know whatever it is I need to know. Oh, okay, these guys slept for 12 hours, or there's a fight that took place that I'm privy to because I was able to see it first, as opposed to seeing it as a small little clip on the television show. For Idol, there was Idol Academy and merchandising like t-shirts. There's blooper content and chat show content that you create as additional content outside of the main show. For Got Talent, there was a series of live events called CEO's Got Talent, which actually did really, really well for us while it was happening. Then there are digital iterations. There are apps that are created. TED, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, as an international property, they are now looking at seeing how they can take it to various countries in different forms. So whether it is in the form of a podcast, whether it is on Nippon TV in Japan, whether it is with SRK on Star Plus. Please excuse the noise because there is some construction work happening in the flat above mine. So then there are, TV show iterations globally. Lego Movie is another, sort of brand content that was created that is not a format, but again, if you were to look at the two, it is something that will live on forever, And so I'd also like to take you through like a small example of what I'm doing in terms of a personal experience in brand building. So there is a documentary called Coral Woman, which directed by Priya Thuvasari, and I am the impact producer on that film, a documentary. Now that documentary is about marine conservation. And we sort of presented this to a bunch of people who sort of wanted to partner with us. And as a result of all of those various partnerships that took place today, and again, I'm saying this in the context of content for social impact. We were able to set up a website for it. We released a book with HarperCollins recently, which is a children's illustrated book, again, borrowed from the documentary itself. We are now planning an art residency in Goa. Again, the inspiration is Coral Woman. Now, the whole thing is, it becomes a long-term vision where you look outside of the content that you have created to create different touch points for audiences. And also sort of build the target audience. So if you're looking at youth as a target audience, then where would you go? You would go to social media, you would go to kids and maybe create educational virtual toolkits for children to sort of, or for schools to adopt as part of the curriculum. So, I mean, today there is so much opportunity to leverage content in different ways. And that is something that is becoming increasingly important. And again, for people who are looking at building brands, that's really what the whole game is about. It's about looking outside of just that small sort of space and building it out. Now let's see if I were to mention a couple of Indian content brands or brands that have been created. Why are they not international formats, right? So there is a Saregama, there is a Dance Plus, Roadies, Dance India Dance, and there are many, many more. All of these have done several seasons. Again, what's the difference here? The difference here is that the IP is owned by the broadcaster. Now, Saregama and Dance India Dance has been created by the broadcaster, and they have sort of collaborated with a production company to roll these out. But otherwise, because these platforms or broadcasters are not in the business of, how should I put it, building brands of content, because they're looking at something else, these brands don't really move outside of the purview of television as they could. Like, that potential is enormous. Whereas if maybe there was a vertical that was to be created within the company or within the broadcasting company, where that IP could be monetized effectively, we'd have a whole different game playing here, you know, and similar to the way international brands use it.
Anupama,
So-
one question here.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason, okay, is one of the reasons why no Indian, look, we create so much of entertainment content in so many languages, targeting so many different kind of audiences in this country. We have one of the largest film producing nations in the world, right? So why do you think is it that because creators in this country don't think international and they end up always thinking very local when they're creating a format? Is that the reason why we've seen limited success?
No, I think there are multiple reasons here. One is that, you know, international formats really came our way only almost like a decade back or 2 decades back. And the creator sort of community in India has seen it as, you know, as long as I'm paid to create it, then that's enough for me, right? So you put your name to a piece of content, but the vision for it, I think, is now people are slowly waking up to it because they are seeing for themselves the potential that content has. It's not something that we've really been exposed to beyond a point. And that's why you'll see, even from other countries, unless it is the UK and US, the other countries also, there are very few other than Korea and let's say Israel maybe, that the content, even from there, actually, that is beginning to pick up only now. As I think the global exposure to content and the way it can be monetized opens everyone's eyes, they become more and more aware of. So what's happening, I think over the past a decade or so, is that a lot of production companies have been asking for their share of IP. All of them don't get it. Some of them do. And some of them are retaining IP for maybe just creating book extensions or a movie extension like Khichdi, you know. So it's happening, but it's happening at a very small scale. And that's what I'm saying is going to change in a big way, because today, you know, as production companies, the world is beginning to open up to them. So it's not just India that's their market, right? And the minute that happens, you realize that owning IP becomes so important and so critical. Let me give you another example. Like, if you look at independent filmmakers, IP is intellectual property, intellectual copyright.
Yeah.
So So maybe let me expand on that a little more, is that if you have, if you've created content, okay, let's say, let me make it simple. You've written a book. You sell that book to, let's say, Penguin. Penguin pays you for it, but they own all the rights. So now tomorrow, if they want to create a digital version of that book, if they want to put it on Kindle, they will own the rights to it. Whereas if it is a self-published book, you own the rights. And that allows you to make money of all the various possible extensions, whether it is somebody purchasing a book for a movie or for a television show, you own the rights. So, this is what we're waking up to now. And I think that's what's sort of changing how people are. And that's why I think over a period of time, we are going to see more success come out of India.
Yeah. So, sorry, just an extension. So do you think you'll ever be able to do a money heist?
Yeah, why not? Absolutely. I mean, look at Scam. It's not gone into multiple seasons, but as a finite show, it has been noted across the globe. And on IMDb, I think it's one of the highest rated pieces of content globally.
Wow.
So it's going to happen. And I really, really believe that the golden age of content is, we are at that tipping point in India. So, and that's why I, wherever possible, I talk about IP, because it's so important for people to realize how much freedom IP gives you and how much power, and it's becoming more and more important to have that conversation, to be able to leverage this content the way it needs to be leveraged, which right now it cannot be, because it is held by people whose intention may be there to sort of monetize it, but they don't have that bandwidth. Their bandwidth is occupied with creating a pipeline, a developmental pipeline, rolling out shows, marketing them, selling them, doing all this. So it's a very, very different mindset. So to be able to monetize the content that you own is a completely separate vertical, in my opinion.
Yeah, sorry. Just an extension of this, I mean, if you look at, let's say, individuals, therefore, who are creating content. Let's say I'm a YouTube star and I have some talent and I'm creating content. Is individual IP also valuable in your mind, or will it become more valuable over time? Or is it only?
Yeah. It's like today people are creating personal equity. They are becoming brands, right? That's what a brand is. At the end of the day, it applies not just to a product or a show, but also to an individual. So if you're able to build that equity for yourself and you're one of those influencers, you're making money on the basis of who you are. You're not dependent on anybody or let's say somebody is not making money off you and you're not benefiting from that. Now you can decide who you want to partner with, and the money is all channeled to you. It's all about monetization and building your own sort of attributes that allow you to stand up and speak for yourself. They free you from, the corporate binding, and you can be a person in your own right.
I think Harish has an interesting question. He says, so how does a producer convince a broadcaster to pay only for content and not the IP?
So that's the thing. If a producer decides to invest money and create content, this is what Applause is doing, right? Immediately the shift happens, because then you're taking a completed show to a distributor and saying, do you want this? But please remember that the risk in that is enormous. First of all, every show is not great. And every platform may not be interested in the content that you're creating. But because today there are so many platforms available, and there is so much niche segmentation that's taking place, it allows you to be able to sell your content to one person or the other. But what it requires of you is to put your skin in the game, or basically, to put it simply, put your money where your mouth is. So if you have a great idea, put a team together, put your money behind it, put it together. And if you're willing to take that kind of risk, that's one kind of risk. The other is, let's say, now we are diverging a little bit, but since you've asked me this question, there are a lot of producers, what they're doing now is that they are sort of buying rights to books, because on a lot of OTT platforms, books become a easier template to follow because they are established, they probably already have an existing audience base. And so for us to convert that book into a web series is easier. So if a producer goes and let's say obtains the rights to some really best-selling authors or books existing in the market, then that allows them some leverage. But it's at the end of the day, if you want to own IP, you will have to take some risks. And that's where the trade-off is possible. Otherwise, if a platform is going to fund you to put a show together, then there is no reason for them to give you the IP because they're taking the entire risk. So that's really where it's at.
Awesome.
Okay. Moving on. So we've spoken about international formats. We've talked about formats in India, which have tried to become more than just multiple seasons, but they haven't been able to, right? And then we have branded entertainment. So I'll mention, Zahid, you can go to those slides now. So branded entertainment, again, why hasn't it got the kind of success that it could, and maybe we can make this more of a conversation, because I'd also love to hear how all of you think. In my mind, or, there are very, very few successful branded entertainment pieces of content, One is something that took place many, many years ago called Wheel Smart Shrimati. And it went into a couple of seasons on Doordarshan. Then there's Coke Studio, which has done, and this is something, again, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, is that, if I'm not mistaken, I think there have been 14 seasons in Pakistan, 4 seasons in India, and several seasons in the Middle East and Philippines. And I think they also have a digital version of the same. Now, why has this branded entertainment, why has this particular brand been so successful? What could be the reason behind it? And I think maybe if you can sort of create connections between what I've just said before this into what goes into creating and building a format, you might find some answers there, Then there is, there's Red Bull, which obviously is not available on any OTT platform per se, but on YouTube, it's one of the most significant sort of properties, because the kind of integration they have done without being overt is seamless. So you have, they sell you an experience, the kind of sports videos they've created, their sort of associations with art and concerts is phenomenal. And they are rolling it out constantly, and they are creating this content. And then there is a more recent example, which is like Yuna Academy's Kota Factory, where only 2 seasons have been made in partnership with TVF. And it's about the lives of IIT aspirants, which is a completely seamless blend with what Yuna Academy stands for. Now, the thing about creating this kind of content is that, one, it requires major investment from the brand, right? It also requires a lot of long-term thinking. So you're going to think beyond what you've created, which means that, so if I've created, let's say, Kota Factory, or not even Kota Factory, let's say Coke Studio, I am paying for that piece of content, and I'm paying for it to be placed on, let's say, one of the platforms. How do I monetize this property? So it could be ads from brands that are not in conflict with Coke. But more than that, it's about just building an intangible benefit for your viewer so that the viewer is constantly reminded of Coke through associations that are pleasant, that are engaging, and that don't feel like they've been forced down your throat, you know. And that's where sort of branded entertainment can be successful. But what happens very often is, Zahid, could we go to the other slides? Yeah. No, the Indian ones. So Quaker Oats on Hotstar, I think it's done 3 seasons. And even in this show, the integration is very obvious. You know, it's a cooking show. It has Vikas Khanna, it has celebrities, it has new recipes. So food is the engagement here. And it has done 3 seasons, obviously. 1, because it's delivering for Quaker. 2, because Hotstar is benefiting from it in terms of content, because you have faces that help you build a better reach, right? But what if Quaker Oats were to, and I'm not speaking for Quaker Oats, but it's a hypothesis, is that if you were to step back and create a show for the sake of creating a show, an entertaining show, which has all the elements that you think are going to sort of really engage the viewer, and just put your name to it without forcing it, or, it's like you don't find people drinking from Coke cans within Coke Studio. It's a very subliminal way of doing it, but it is so effective because as a viewer, I'm not feeling like, okay, now you want me to, this is clearly designed by Coke so that I can, go and buy Coke, and they're going to drill it down, into my subliminal or my subconscious. But it's you're just seeking the intangible benefits of this. What is the worth in looking at it more long term and less as though, okay, if we've done one show and it's got us the eyeballs that we wanted, now let's move on to creating another property. Because that's not brand building, is it? So, I mean, that's really where I was coming from in terms of whether it is branded entertainment or whether it is building formats that live for seasons after seasons.
But Anupam, don't you think this is the challenge for brands, unlike, let's say, a production house where the format becomes the...
It is, I think,
which is why
I think if brands sort of get into partnerships with production companies, see, at the end of the day, they own the IP also, yeah.
So
but they're not looking at it beyond that.
Okay. So you think production companies will be willing to co-own an IP with a brand and build?
Why not? Absolutely.
They will take
absolutely,
it.
Yeah.
Not just
but what happens very often, and the fear is always that because it's an advertiser funded program. First of all, I think if we move away from that kind of terminology, it'll sort of open things up a little more and allow people to just create content for the sake of creating content. And somebody asked that question, but ain't that AFP versus creatively done by programming teams? Exactly. But if that's exactly what I'm saying, is that even with programming teams, see, at the end of the day, because the advertiser is paying the broadcaster an X amount of money for the broadcaster, and you'll find very often these shows are never placed during prime time. Why aren't they placed during prime time? Clearly, it's not something that is seen by the programming team as content that would be watched by a large cross section of audience. So, yeah.
I think there's
So I'm
something to
actually more or
learn.
less done.
Sorry,
If there are any
yeah.
questions, I'd be happy to take them.
So this the point I wanted to add is that I think there's something to learn from a lot of the YouTube, especially the successful YouTube stars,
Yeah.
of how they actually look at data from every single piece of content they put out, and really look at how did people respond to it, what were the comments, and they keep working on it. One often thinks that if you're a YouTube star or you're creating content as an individual, you're not really, there's no science behind it. But I think the fact is that even individuals are starting to realize the value of creating a personal brand.
Yeah.
And there's so much effort that goes into actually creating that content. It's not as simple as it looks.
True.
And that's why
Very
they're
true.
making so much money, right? I mean, today Indian YouTube stars have started to now, start making money through a revenue share with YouTube, which was never thought of, or nobody thought it would happen maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
True. And ask them to ever give that up. They will never, because the kind of money they are making today,
Yes.
they would never see if they were working as employees in a company at mid-level or junior level.
Doing something
So,
they love. That's the most important
absolutely.
thing, right?
That's the most important thing. And then brands are seeking them out and saying, will you help us push your brand, push our brands? So I think as we go forward, it'll become a win-win for everyone. Right now, it's not a win-win for everyone.
So right now, you think the platforms are running away
No,
with most of the
I
money?
think even the platforms, while they're putting so much money behind creating this content, and some of it is great content, they're not being able to monetize it. One, because like I said, that's not one, their skill set. Two, it's not their sort of purview, right? So either if they were to create, and again, that's investing some more money into creating a vertical where there is a team that only does this work. What happens at companies like Fremantle and Endemol is that they have a set of people who are only looking at, so there is a licensing team, there is a team that looks at extensions, there is a team that looks at merchandising. It's a whole different ballgame.
The
So
business model is built on monetizing the IP. Right?
Yes.
I mean, that's their business.
Yes, that's the
at the end of the
business.
day. Right.
Because it's a huge business. Imagine being able to license your content to 25 countries, and not for one season, but for multiple seasons. And, to be able to share revenue for every season. So it's not just licensing, it's also advertising revenue. It's all kinds of, different ways that you can slice and dice this content and monetize it. So it's a huge opportunity. It's also very, very difficult, which is why a lot of people don't do it. And also a lot of people, I think, haven't yet twigged on to the potential that is available, but it will happen.
Absolutely. I think, if you look at NFTs, for example, and digital art, the way it's taking off,
Yes.
suddenly any individual who can create digital art has an opportunity to monetize their talent. It's content in some form, right? It's digital art, but it is content. So
absolutely,
in a way, that's also opening up new windows.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what's your sense, Anupam, and as a parting question is that, I'll go back to the question. There's a question from Poonam Patel. Does revenue earned by the show go to the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting?
No. No. It goes to unless it's Doordarshan, I'm guessing. But no, these are all privately owned companies, right? So whether it is Sony or Colors, or it goes to them.
Because they pay tax, which they have to pay
They
for
pay
the government
tax.
on everything they run.
Yeah.
But as a parting shot, I just wanted to check with you. So, we've seen Money Heist season 5. It's become a huge phenomena in India and across the world, right? And it came from Spain. And so, aside from Scam, the show, was there any other piece of content that you saw which you thought has the ability as a story to cut across geographies and countries in your mind in the recent past? Any show done by Indian, like, Kota Factory is great, but it's very relevant to India, right? In the sense, it's so
Correct. So I think actually what is happening is that right now, the focus is more on creating content that is culturally relevant to the Indian audience. Because right now the idea is to build that base first. if something clicks and resonates with the audiences living, and the same content then gets sort of picked up by NRIs or people living in different countries. But for it to sort of resonate with the values or see, why did Ugly Betty work the way it did across the globe? It's about an ugly girl who gets into a fashion house and falls in love with a guy who runs that fashion. It gives you, it affords hope, aspiration, it gives hope to people who are just like the girl next door, boy next door. It's got so many different, and it's talent. It's all of those things, right? So if the premise of that show or that content is universal and allows for it to be adapted across countries, it'll work. But I think right now the focus across OTT platforms here in India is to just build it for the local audiences and to do, to create as much connect with within the interiors of India. The thing is, we also have such a diverse sort of audience, right? So it's a difficult audience to in any way connect with.
That's true. It's a challenge.
So yeah, so that challenge is there. Eventually, I think we will make that content that will travel across the globe and get recognized. But these things don't happen easily. Like even Money Heist, I mean, it was around for the longest. I think there's a history to Money Heist as well. And it goes back many, many years before it became the success that it did. But that's another story.
There's a question from Harish.
Yeah. Any insight on how Web 3.0 will change the branded content? So I'm not really the authority on this, on blockchain, but blockchain is definitely going to, blockchain, and I would say artificial intelligence. I would also say virtual reality and augmented reality. These are all going to become huge elements in how digital moves forward and how content is created. Because now any piece of content that you watch needs to be far more interactive. And yes, absolutely. So, like today, if I'm watching a piece of content, and let's take, for example, just Idol in itself, right? And if I'm watching it, and I'm watching it at my time on digital, I want to know where that outfit has come from. And if I were to click on it, it gives me that information that it was designed by so-and-so, it costs so-and-so, it is available at so-and-so boutique, right? Or same for the shoes. And I mean, you're seeing it on social media, where if you were to if that piece of content allows for it, you will know exactly where it's come from, who are the collaborators and people who are associated with the creation of that content and with the elements that are within that content. So I think where Web 3.0 is going to go is mind-boggling, is exciting, and is going to go in so many different directions that I think we ourselves 10 years from now are going to be gobsmacked by where it's traveled, So
the metaverse will take over by then, I think.
Totally.
I think that time content will be a different ball game, and
it'll be a different
it'll be completely different, right?
And it'll be way, way more interactive, way, way more
lovely. Before we close, any questions from anyone else? Any thoughts? Any comments? Please feel free to put up your hand and ask, or anything at all. Hey, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, wonderful. Thank you all for joining us on a Saturday evening. I know it's not easy. It's the one day you'll get off, but thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Anupama. Been really, really interesting. And I think we're all looking forward to the day that an Indian IP outshines, shines in the world and across the world, right? I think given the fact that we have so many wonderful content creators in this country, it's unfortunate it hasn't happened. And
it'll happen. I think people are still struggling with the transition phase that we are all in.
Yeah.
but it'll happen.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Thank
Great,
you so
Yata.
much, everyone. And I hope I could add some value somewhere for some of you. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care and have a
Thank
lovely
you.
weekend ahead.
Yeah.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Yes, bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you, Arman. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone.